Okay, let's just dive right into this explainer. We're going to peel back the layers on all those headlines screaming that AI is taking our jobs, and we're going to find out what's actually happening in the economy right now. I mean, if you've been reading the news lately, you'd probably think we're in the middle of this sudden robot apocalypse, right? Like artificial intelligence is just sweeping through corporate America and clearing out human workers by the thousands. But, as we're going to see today, the story we are being told isn't exactly the whole truth.
So let's start with Section 1, the AI layoff story, and look at the smoking gun that really kicked off this whole investigation.
In May 2026, Coinbase cut 700 people. That was a massive 14% of its staff, and the move cost them up to $60 million in restructuring charges alone. Now, when a company spends that kind of money just to let people go, you know for sure there is a major strategic pivot happening. But the question is, a pivot to what?
What's really fascinating here is how CEO Brian Armstrong's memo framed these massive cuts. He absolutely did not frame it as a retreat. Instead, he framed it as this futuristic inevitability. He called it an inflection point, heavily implying that the company was simply taking the lead into a bold new era of technology that everybody else would soon be forced to follow.
His memo painted this pristine, almost utopian picture of efficiency. Armstrong described engineers shipping in days instead of weeks, non-technical staff suddenly writing production code, and workflows becoming fully automated. The grand plan? To rebuild the entire company around what he called AI-native pods. These are incredibly small teams where a single person can literally direct AI agents to do the work that used to require 3 people. It's a very clean story, isn't it? It implies that AI is just so incredibly good, human jobs are simply obsolete.
Well, let's move to Section 2, uncovering the alibi. Because if we actually look at the numbers, a much messier mix of market pressures is doing the real work here.
There's some wildly inconvenient context that the AI narrative conveniently glossed over. Revenue would actually plunge 21.6%. They posted a staggering $667 million net loss. On top of that, Bitcoin had dropped more than a third from its peak. Plus, think about it. If AI was really automating coding and engineering, you would completely expect those departments to take the hit, but they didn't. The deepest cuts targeted compliance, international product, and platform groups, not the revenue core. That points straight to old-fashioned geographic cost-cutting, not some grand AI revolution.
And you know, the timeline of these job cuts brilliantly illustrates the real pattern. In 2022, they cut 18%. Early 2023, another 21%. Both of those cuts happened right during known crypto winters, long before anyone was throwing around the phrase AI native. The May 2026 cut of 14% lands exactly where you would expect in yet another cyclical crypto downturn. So, are these layoffs actually driven by artificial intelligence, or is AI merely being used to justify them?
Now, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, but it's not just Coinbase. And you'd be absolutely right. If we zoom out and look at the macro data from Challenger Gray and Christmas, AI really does seem like the culprit across the board. From January to May 2026, U.S. job cuts, explicitly citing AI, surged from just 7% all the way up to a massive 40%. We are talking about over 87,000 jobs attributed to AI in just a matter of months. I mean, it looks exactly like a smoking gun.
But here is the catch, and it's a huge one. This data relies entirely on a concept called self-attribution. That simply tracks what employers say is happening, not what independent analysis can actually verify to be true. Even Sam Altman has warned about AI washing, which is when companies basically dress up ordinary, run-of-the-mill cost-cutting in really fancy transformation language. Labor attorneys are even noting that the jobs genuinely eliminated by AI so far are minimal. The truth is, most employers are still just in the phase of trying to figure out how their existing people can even use these tools.
So that leads us into Section 3, the power of narrative. Why frame it as AI? Why are tech companies so eager to point the finger at artificial intelligence when they lay people off?
It's all about what we call the optics flip. Think about it. If a company announces they're firing 700 people because crypto crashed and they are bleeding cash, well, that sends a massive distress signal to investors. Everyone panics. But if you take those exact same 700 cuts and frame them as an AI-native rebuild, suddenly you're sending a strong signal of visionary foresight. It tells investors that you're way ahead of the curve. It is the exact same reality, but a completely opposite message.
The absolute brilliance of this alibi is incredibly simple. The budget line moves, even if the robot doesn't actually take the seat.
Regardless of whether a specific human role was directly replaced by an AI agent, the money saved from eliminating that worker gets boldly redirected right toward the company's AI budget.
But there's a quieter, honestly much darker mechanism at play here, which brings us to one of the most crucial takeaways from this entire explainer. As one post-labor economist put it perfectly, the narrative of displacement is itself a tool of wage discipline.
So what does that actually mean in plain English? Well, it means that managing expectations shifts bargaining power away from workers and hands it directly over to capital. You don't even need the AI technology to work yet. Just the fear of AI displacement, repeated over and over across countless news headlines, keeps workers sitting very still. I mean, if you believe a machine is coming for your job tomorrow, you are definitely not going to march into your boss's office today and demand a raise. You're not going to aggressively job hunt. The AI layoff story does very real work on the labor market by suppressing wages long before any actual automation even takes place.
All right, Section 4, the real restructuring signal. Because while the AI Alibi is super convenient, it's actually providing cover for a very real transition that's happening right now.
Those 700 lost jobs at Coinbase? Probably cyclical, but the real signal is the massive reorg. They capped management at just 5 layers, they pushed the employee-to-manager ratio way past 15-1, which, by the way, is part of this slightly terrifying mega-manager trend sweeping corporate America right now. They required all their leaders to become hands-on player coaches. And finally, they started unbundling tasks to hand off to AI agents. This isn't just some clever headcount trick. This is a fundamental ground-up redesign of how work gets done.
There's this one internal phrase from their memos that is literally staggering. They describe the new model as an intelligence, with humans around the edge aligning it. Coinbase is straight up describing the future operating model of frontier software teams. The company itself becomes the central intelligence, and humans are just pushed out to the edges to steer it.
So the reality here is that jobs aren't just vanishing overnight because a robot physically sat down at a desk. Instead, we are witnessing a total redefinition of the unit of work. Companies are redesigning jobs so they can squeeze the exact same output from a much smaller group of people. The bundle of tasks that one single salary used to buy, it's being broken apart, handed to AI wherever possible, and then the remaining tasks are re-aggregated under far fewer human employees.
So look, whenever you hear people arguing over whether it's just the economy or just AI causing these layoffs, remember that is a false binary. 3 things are actually true at once. The immediate cuts are mostly driven by cost downturns. The AI story is just a really convenient narrative layered on top for optics. But the long-term structural shift that narrative points to, that is very real. The cyclical downturn simply gives companies the perfect cover story and the budget to act on this structural transition early.
And the economic data shows us that the actual threat to the workforce isn't some sudden, massive wave of robot-induced unemployment. The real immediate risk is what we call the transition speed gap. This is the very real danger that companies adopt AI and streamline their org charts much faster than displaced workers are able to retrain and transition into the new roles that will inevitably be created. That gap in timing is where the real economic pain is going to be felt.
Finally, Section 5. Who captures the surplus? Let's talk about what you should actually take away from this explainer, whether you're a worker, an operator, or an investor trying to navigate this crazy landscape.
To survive this transition, you really need to develop 3 specific habits. First, separate what companies say from what they actually do. Demand proof. If a company claims massive AI efficiency, but they don't have the productivity metrics to back it up, well, that's your tell. Second, watch the structure of the organization, not just the raw headcount. You want to look out for the flattening of org charts and the move to those human at the edges models. And third, acknowledge the expectations game. You have to recognize when highly amplified narratives of job displacement are actually being used as tactics to suppress wages and limit worker mobility.
So the deeper question, the one that post-labor economics just keeps circling back to, is this. As the core unit of production shifts away from human headcount and toward capital and automated agents, who captures the surplus? Think about it. When the work is automated and the missing workers are no longer getting paid those salaries, who gets to keep the money? That is the real conversation the corporate alibi is keeping us from having. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time as we keep peeling back the layers on how our world actually works.